Hello, my name is Daryl Robert Schoon, and we have been talking about central banking in the United States. We discussed Paul Volcker, his role in taking the demonetization of gold in the global financial system in 1971 under Nixon, where he returned as head of the Federal Reserve Bank, chairman of the Fed, and raised interest rates to 24% in order to stop the inflation that he himself had set in motion. In 1987, Volcker was removed by President Reagan, who appointed Alan Greenspan in his place. Volcker was removed because he did not want to deregulate to the degree that President Reagan and his Wall Street friends wanted him to do, and they replaced him with Alan Greenspan. Alan Greenspan was to rule the Fed, to head the Fed for 19 years, from 1987 to 2006. What is not known about Greenspan is that when he was a younger man, as all economists were in the United States, he was fascinated with the phenomenon of the Great Depression. And Greenspan, being a peculiarly brilliant mind, wondered if he could have prevented the Great Depression if he had been at the helm of the Fed during the 1930s. Well, fate gave Alan a chance at the wheel. And what Alan did was set in motion another Great Depression on his watch. And he did this by continually feeding the system with more credit. And that credit built and built and built until it exploded in 2000 with the greatest speculative bubble collapse since 1929. Now, when that stock market collapsed after the dot-com boom, which happened on Alan Greenspan's watch, I went over in the last program and I pointed out that in 1994, Greenspan had already seen a bubble developing in the stock market and had moved to choke it off by raising interest rates in 1994. And in a self-congratulatory message, he said, I think we have stopped that bubble. We have pricked it in its infancy. By 1996, he saw that he had not done so, and he went and he warned the Congress that the Fed might be required to raise interest rates to stop another bubble he saw happening. Well, Wall Street didn't want that bubble stopped. These boys make fortunes off of bubbles. And they wanted that. They didn't even see it as a bubble. They saw it as an expansion of the U.S. economy, and the stock market was going to go higher. And so when they did nothing, Greenspan made a speech in March 1997, and he said bluntly, I'm going to raise interest rates. 1 month later, Alan Greenspan said, I am not going to raise interest rates. Obviously, he got a phone call from the boys that run the country, the Wall Street boys that had exerted pressure on Bill Clinton. Well, they didn't exert pressure on Bill Clinton. He didn't need to have pressure exerted on him. Bill Clinton was already in the employ and owned by Goldman Sachs. His good friend Bob Rubin, who was to make over $100 million in the next 10 years, already had tremendous influence in the Clinton White House. In fact, during the Mexican debt crises of 1994 and 1995, when Mexico could no longer pay on its bonds, it went bankrupt, the United States passed a $90 billion bailout of Mexico on those bonds. What was hidden in that bailout, what was embedded in it, was a check for $4 billion written to Goldman Sachs from the U.S. Treasury, indemnifying all Goldman Sachs bondholders from any losses on their Mexican bonds. Goldman Sachs and Wall Street already had their hooks into Bill Clinton, and Alan Greenspan was their more than willing man at the helm. Well, when the dot-com boom collapsed, the bubble that he saw happening in 1994 actually transpired and collapsed, bringing down the U.S. stock market, sending us into what he feared was another Great Depression, because this man was not ignorant. He saw what was happening. Alan Greenspan knew we were in trouble. The NASDAQ dropped 80% in the year by 2001. The Dow Jones and S&P had dropped 40 to 60%. We were headed for another Great Depression, another stock market collapse. So what he did was this. He did something that was very unusual, and he even knew it at the time. They slashed interest rates from 5.5% down to 1%, setting in motion another bubble. This time, the bubble happened, not in the stock market, though it started to come back. It did rise again, but it wasn't a bubble. Where the money went, where the bubble became apparent, was in the U.S. housing market. From 2002 to 2006, the housing market exploded, fed with Wall Street mortgage money given to people who could not pay what they were taking out loans on. Properties doubled, tripled. Americans used it as a piggy bank, took cruises, enjoyed the good life. And when it collapsed in 2007, it was the start, truly, the crisis that we're in now. Now, what did Alan Greenspan do? He retired in 2006. The man was not ignorant. The man saw the handwriting on the wall and decided to get out of Dodge while the getting was good. And he did. Who succeeded Alan Greenspan at the helm of the Fed was a man named Ben Bernanke. Ben Bernanke had graduated from Princeton. And like Alan Greenspan, he too had a dream. He too felt that he was particularly suited to a particular time running the central bank. Alan Greenspan had wondered if he could perhaps prevent a Great Depression. I think history will show us that he started the second one. Ben Bernanke's question was a little different. He fancied himself a student of the Great Depression, and he was. But if you're going to study the Great Depression, it's very important what you study and who you study under. Ben Bernanke's mentor was none other than Milton Friedman, the poster boy of the right. Just as John Maynard Keynes was the poster boy of the left, Milton Friedman was the poster boy of the right. Each one, Keynes and Friedman, believed in the power of the human spirit to control and make destiny. Each one believed that if you gave humanity more power, they could solve all the problems in front of them. I call this the Tower of Babel of human hubris. What Keynes did, he fed the fantasies of the left. What Friedman did, he fed the fantasies of the right. Either way, you're feeding human fantasies and human frailties. What Friedman thought and actually believed was that central bankers had caused the Great Depression. Not by putting too much credit in the system, not by letting Wall Street bet the savings of Americans with wild abandon. No. He believed that central bankers were responsible for the Great Depression by choking off the money supply in the 1930s. His little graph showed him very clearly, and his student Ben Bernanke believed him, and many did, that only if the United States had expanded the money supply, which was then contracting as the Great Depression progressed, the Depression would have been stopped in its tracks. What a wonderful theory. And a theory it was. Because when put to the test by Ben Bernanke, the theory failed. Just like Alan Greenspan's theory failed that he could prevent another Great Depression. Ben Bernanke took over from Alan Greenspan in 2006. And in 2007, Greenspan realized he had gotten out of Dodge just in time. Two huge, over-leveraged hedge funds of Bear Stearns collapsed in July of 2007. 1 month later, a worldwide contraction happened across global credit markets. This meant that bad things were on the way. And in 2008, stock markets collapsed all over the world. Lehman Brothers went down. AIG went down, was rescued by the Fed. Huge trillions of dollars had to be put into the system by the Federal Reserve, which was exactly what Bernanke thought should be done. He was a man to the rescue. He assumed the chairmanship and the leadership of the Fed when the fire that Alan Greenspan started burst into flame. Now, isn't this what the knight to the rescue always wishes? That he was there when the fair damsel was at risk? And he could be the hero and save the damsel from her absolute distress, from her death? This is what Helicopter Ben Bernanke thought, because he made a sarcastic remark. In fact, he didn't make the remark. Friedman made the remark, but it eventually fell onto his shoulders. He was to be called Helicopter Ben, because he said, in the event of any severe contraction, we could drop helicopters of money. All right? This is how you could keep a deflationary contraction from taking hold, which had happened in the Great Depression. You see, the Great Depression stuck in the minds of central bankers as the problem that they did not know how to solve. The Depression happened, and it lingered and lingered and lingered, and no monetary stimulus or change pulled the country and the world from the Great Depression in the 1930s. It took a world war that flattened the planet to clear the balance sheets to restart the economy in the 1950s. Nothing the central bankers did had saved it. So it sort of stayed in the air. The great conundrum, the great problem. Now Milton Friedman, the great the great self-deceiver, he thought that he had the answer to that problem. Of course, Friedman came up with this answer after the Great Depression. He wasn't in charge during the Great Depression. So like a lot of academics, they think about things and they thought, you know, I know the answer. Well, you know, you may have the answer, but you don't know if it's the answer unless it works. So his theory, he convinced a lot of people that he had the answer to what happened during the Great Depression. And one of those people he convinced was this Ben Bernanke. In 2007, Ben Bernanke was exactly in the position that he wanted to be in. He was the point man when the world financial system began to implode. And what he did is that he threw trillions of dollars of taxpayers' money at the financial system, most of it in cheap loans to his friends in Wall Street, who were basically insolvent. Citicorp, Bank of America, Lehman's, Bear Stearns, they were all sucking mud. They were all on their knees. And were it not for the government lifeline, they would have not have survived. Bernanke tossed them a lifeline and charged them nothing for it. The United States government bailed out Wall Street. Now, if you had another private equity firm and the banks were in trouble, and that firm gave them and saved their asses from collapse, which they did, you can trust me that that private equity firm would have ended up owning those banks. They would have charged them a quid pro quo for saving them in a time of distress. What did the United States get from it? What did the taxpayers get from it? Nada. Nada. At least nothing in comparison to the service they did to Wall Street. What we have is a revolving door between Wall Street and Washington, D.C. Both parties are owned by Wall Street. They're not owned outright, but they are owned in actuality because of their vast influence over both political parties. When Obama came in, he talked about change. And God knows we needed change. And that's why he talked about it. This man could talk about change better than anyone. And he had a right to talk about change. Because if this country elected a black man, that was change. I will assure you, the only thing more radical was to elect a transvestite. And I can assure you, this country was in no mood to elect a transvestite, even if that transvestite held the keys to the kingdom and could actually solve our problems. What they did, though, was they elected a black man who said he had the keys to the problems, and he didn't. What he did have was the word change. And we needed a change from a stupid frat boy rich kid who ran this country into the ground and gave Wall Street every damn thing they wanted that Clinton hadn't given them before. We needed change. And so we voted for change, and so we got a black man instead of a white man who did exactly what the white man had done before him. We didn't leave the Middle East. Oh, we sort of left Iraq. We're still there if you haven't noticed. And we moved the goddamn game back over to Afghanistan. We're still running a war machine. And the boys that were in power during Bush's administration, during Clinton's administration, they remained the same. Hank Paulson, Timothy Geithner, the revolving door between Wall Street and Washington, D.C. stayed the same. So Americans voted for change, and what they got was more of the same in the guise of a black man. Now, I'm not without my own prejudices, all right? And I rather like what Obama promised. Great promises. He said it. This country needs change, and I'm going to deliver. I remember on the floor of the Senate, he said he would filibuster. He would oppose all this government intrusion into wiretapping. Wonderful words. You know what he did? He put them into law. He extended them. He didn't oppose them. Once he got into power, the boys who owned Obama made sure he did what they wanted him to do. Politicians serve two masters. They don't serve two masters. They only serve one. They serve one master, and the way they get to serve that master is to get you to vote for them. Because if they can't get you to vote for them, they don't get to serve their master. All right? That is what they have to do. They have to deliver the electorate of America on a silver platter to the boys who own and run the United States of America. If they can't deliver you, they don't get in. And sometimes, when the boys on the left have totally screwed up this country gets sick of them and votes in for somebody on the right. And that person delivers the country to the masters. And then after a while, when this country gets sick of what the people on the right have done, they get sick of them and they throw them out and they vote for somebody from the left who gets elected and delivers you to the people that they serve. Now, I may sound cynical, and I hope I do, because it's the truth. This country voted for change and got more of the same. Now, it did change. The color of the man in the office changed. But the people behind that man didn't change. Now, I'm not saying Barack Obama is the same man as George W. Bush. They are not. But their policies are so closely alike, it would take a blind man with intuition to discover the difference. The rhetoric was worse under Bush. It was unabashed. The rhetoric under Obama is more moderate. The policies are the same. Ben Bernanke was a boy from the center, from the cartel of bankers that owned this country. They put him in 2007. Obama kept him there. Obama put Larry Summers in as his chief economic advisor. Do you know who Larry Summers is? This man, when he was vice president of the World Bank, wrote a memo that suggested that polluting industry should be moved from first world countries to third world countries, when the human cost would be lower. This was a man who was forced to resign from the presidency of Harvard because he made some sarcastic remark that women just weren't as smart as men. This was a man that Obama selected as his chief economic advisor. This was the man who argued, along with Alan Greenspan, to keep derivatives from being controlled and regulated. Derivatives, which are the time bombs sitting underneath the financial system. This is the man that argued for the deregulation that ruined the American economy. This is the man that the man you elected to change America appointed as his chief economic advisor. Now, maybe you have another reason why this stuff happens. Maybe you going about your life, have figured out another reason that explains why I don't care if you pull that lever, or you pull this lever, or you pull that lever, the same damn thing seems to happen. It's like those little kids, and at least when I was growing up, they used to have those baby seats in the back with a fake steering wheel. Kid sits there and he's drooling, he's like this, and he's got crap in his diapers, and he's playing that steering wheel. Well, that's not too much difference to you when you guys are watching MSNBC or Fox News or seeing this person. Who are you going to vote for? You got your little steering wheel and you're going, and you got crap in your diapers and you're going to vote. And the people that gave you that steering wheel just feed you the pablum. And they're real happy. They're worried, but they're real happy. And you are happy for a little while if the guy you voted for wins. But what you don't realize is that those people they bow to power. They don't get there unless they've been vetted. They don't get there unless the powers that be can live with who they believe these people are. If any person challenges them, they're tossed out the door. Ron Paul has been asking to shut down the Fed for over 25 years. He gets a huge chunk of the straw polls of Republican Party voters. And when he comes to address the convention, they shut the door on him. He had to talk from across the street. That's what they did with Ron Paul. And when Howard Dean actually looked like he was serious about stopping the war, they faked some stupid thing, the scream that ended his candidacy. How can a scream end a candidacy? But they wanted to make sure that when push came to shove, he wasn't going to be there, because they knew that Bill Clinton, Al Gore, and whoever else was running on the Democratic platform would cave in. When they stole the elections in Florida, all they needed was one senator to stand up. The only people who challenged that were the black congressmen and congresswomen in the Congress, in the House of Representatives. Only the disenfranchised blacks stood up and said, we challenge the results. We challenge this. They stood up in Congress. All they needed was one senator to stand with them. And there were no black senators. They were all white. And every damn Democrat sat down. Power was at stake. And when you see power transferred like that, you know the fix is in. The fix is in. So, what you have is a system where the corruption is so endemic that you have no control over it. I mean, listen, I watched what was happening just like you. And I knew what was happening. And the truth of the matter is, I can't do anything more about it than you can. Now, this doesn't mean we can't do anything. All right? Now, personally, I don't vote. All right? I mean, to me, it's like seeing a porno film. It may make you feel better for a little while, but it ain't really going to solve your problems. All right? And fine, I got no problem with you voting. I got no problem with people watching porno. I just have a problem with you thinking your relationships are going to be better or your world is going to change because of what you do. Now, if you want to change your world, you have to begin with yourself. You have to begin. The powers that are out there are so powerful that you cannot fight them on the turf that they own and control. And I've got no problem with resistance. I have no problem with people taking to the streets. I have no problem with people voicing their concerns. I have no problem with voicing their aspirations. All right? But this game is so paid off. This game is so controlled at these levels that you have to go to basically your spiritual self. You basically are going to have to call on powers that you don't even know that you have to stop what is going on in this world. Under the guise of democracy and freedom, you are ending up with a totalitarian military-industrial police state. Do you realize that? Do you realize what has happened in this country in the last 50 years with a, quote, free election, with elections every 4 years, with a two-party system that represents your aspirations and your voices? You are voting yourselves into tyranny. You might want to sit back now that you're losing your homes, now that your children's futures are indentured. I mean, just to bring this up to you, if you know anyone who's taken out a college loan, I want to tell you something. You can discharge a mortgage by bankruptcy. You can discharge credit card debt by bankruptcy. But if you've taken out a college loan, you can't discharge it through bankruptcy. They own their future. And if this is the future you want for your children, you can be happy because you've handed it to them.